Hello, I'm Ken Beck from Sonoma State, and many of you who are on the imaging listserv saw Peter Flores sent something out a week or two ago about a security-related software change request that we've put into Highland. The problem we ran into, I mean, it's like what a lot of folks here are talking about is, okay, we've loaded all this data into OnBase, and it's some is from HR, which means they'll have level 1 data, things like that. We also want to open up OnBase so that students can come in and fill out forms and people can approve things, and so we want to open up the access, and yet we have this level 1 data in there. And so our campus was trying to do that too. Then all of a sudden our ISO and our security people jumped up and were saying, hey, you can't be opening up access to OnBase if you have level 1 data in there. They were concerned about what happens if somebody like fishes and goes and gets the logon credentials of someone in HR and then can go and take over the workstation of somebody somewhere else on campus and use those credentials to go in and steal all the level 1 data and things like that. And so basically, they kind of, shut down a lot of what we were trying to do with these workflows and approvals and forms and things like that. And our ISO has been talking to all of your ISOs and things, and what he's telling us, oh yeah, the ISOs are saying, well, yeah, we're opening it up more than we should, and it was done so over the ISO's objections, or it was done before I became ISO, and it's like all of these kind of rumbling issues, and for some campuses they're rumbling up to the point where they're stopping our using OnBase, and for other ones they kind of threaten to do that unless we can get a solution in place so that we can secure the level 1 data while still opening up access to the rest of OnBase. And so we came up with a solution, which is a software change request into Highland right now. And basically what it's doing is it says we want to be able to for a given user group, say you can only log on from these IP addresses. So in other words, for the HR user group, here are the IP addresses of the HR workstations, and those are the only ones that can log on. And yeah, it's okay if one person from HR goes and logs on to the other one's workstation, it doesn't. We don't need to attach the IP addresses to each user. We just attach it to the user group. That way, they can lock down, the user groups that have access to the level 1 data, and be able to open up access to OnBase to other areas. And so, we put in this software change request. Peter has come up and sent something to the listserv saying, hey, are other campuses interested in backing this? Because the more campuses that back these things, with this collaboration we have here, the more we can collaborate and help each other, the more we can push on Highland to prioritize our requests higher. And I've heard there's a number of other things that we'll be talking about that are changes that we would like Highland to do, faster, better, things like this. But this is one that we'd like your support to say, yes, we all want this. This is something that is worth Highland hurry up and doing. So how can we do this? Should we all say yay, and should we? I know 3 other campuses have already said, yeah, we're in favor of this. So.
Hi, can I ask a couple questions just to make sure I understand? I saw the email and I didn't quite understand the premise. What you just said was if someone steals an HR person's credentials, Is that the premise? That's the starting
Yes,
premise?
like phishing, type of thing.
I know, I understand, but
Right,
but
right.
So someone has successfully stolen how's that different than PeopleSoft today?
And that was the first thing that I and many of us were asking our ISO and our security people.
So in
And-
effect,
and-
PeopleSoft isn't
and-
secure enough?
And actually, and what they said is that there actually are audit issues with PeopleSoft at a system-wide level, that basically it's not secure enough, and the auditors have said that. It's just that they can't do anything about PeopleSoft because it's so big, and so it's on their list of things to do, but it's like that kind of is not, what they're saying is that the PeopleSoft issue, it's somebody else's fault and they need to resolve it, but our campuses can't do that. But for OnBase, we have them on our campuses, so if someone steals all of, all of our social security numbers or whatever, the finger points back to our individual campuses.
Yeah, I understand.
And
Okay.
so, what they were saying is that if they were implementing PeopleSoft now, they would not do it the way that it had been done, but it already was done.
Okay, let me ask my second question. If your request is to lock PCs to licenses by IP address, in effect, that's what you're doing?
What it is
access, not necessarily licenses.
right.
but access by IP.
It's a fairly simple change.
Well, I'm not talking about
it just says to have the ability to just say for this user group, they can only log on from these IP addresses.
Yeah, so how do you handle DHCP?
What's that?
How do you handle DHCP that changes the IP address to a pretty big range of potential addresses?
For those particular workstations, like in HR or something or other, they would have to use fixed IP addresses with this.
I got to talk to our ISO because
I think
this seems overly. I need to talk to our ISO about this. This seems overly restricted from my view.
It would be from mine too. It's just that I'm not one of these security people and I'm not an ISO. But basically, yeah, the ISO sits in the office next to mine, and we've been going round and around about this. And yes,
I worry about over or maybe being too limiting. For example, if you do that, then when you have project teams or strike teams that go into other rooms to work, we're going to have to start adding additional IP addresses or some other way to handle that. And then kind of the next question that comes up is, if they're because they're going to say, well, give us VPN access and then make that kind of this set of groups or this set of IP addresses that is added to this group, because that's sort of another way to control this. And then at that point, if credentials are stolen, VPN access happens. I don't know if we're really adding all that much more security to it by making this shift, right? I mean, I almost wonder if there's potentially other ways to handle this, requiring, for certain level of data, requiring 2FA or separating out, write versus read or retrieve. I mean, kind of like what an earlier example, right? So I'm just kind of wondering about this.
Right, and we've looked at many other different different possible solutions. One is splitting OnBase. One is VPNs, two-factor authentication, and tying that two-factor authentication to the Active Directory groups and things like that. And of course, those things can still be done. And for this particular change we're talking about, it doesn't require people to set up IP addresses for different user groups. It just allows them to be able to do that. So for instance, for HR, we could say we want to lock you down so that these are the dozen, half a dozen, whatever IP addresses of those workstations in HR. So for HR, we can do that. For faculty affairs, they don't have level 1 data. It's okay. We don't have to lock them down. For these people who are coming in and getting their whether students or employees who are getting their logins created based on their Active Directory group with limited access, we don't have to lock them down, but it gives the ability to single out certain areas and certain groups if we want to do that. And as for like VPNs and things, like we've talked about that, and I know that our ISO would love to use VPNs for more things, but do you want to use VPNs for everybody? And so that the ability to be able to restrict and say, these guys I want to be secure, the other guys don't need to be, and to be able to single them out. And another way we talked about doing that was doing two-factor authentication for different Active Directory groups or things like that, but apparently I hear that's kind of complex to set up and all that kind of thing with third-party tools that need to be brought in and different things and various servers that need to be set up to handle it, and then there could be situations where you might accidentally give somebody a login in HR without setting up two-factor authentication for that person. And I don't know that much about it myself. Just the other folks who the security people and the technical people who've been talking about it, they're saying, oh, gee, that's hard because of this, this, and this. So this is just a way, kind of a simple way to do it. I'd suggested the way to do it was just have a security keyword you can put on the user group, that if you say, sys-IP or IP or whatever you call it, and then list an IP address or more than one or what have you, if that's there, then that user group, you have to be one of those IP addresses. If it's not there, then it's the same as now.
So I don't want to. I'm sorry. I don't want to be a downer, but I saw the email asking for other colleges to join the SDR, and I figured we'll join. Might as well. I mean, it could be an option. It won't be required. So I joined, and I actually got an email back that says Highland doesn't want to pursue it. So I don't know what recourse we have.
Really?
Actually,
I mean, I haven't heard. I mean, no, we have.
257462. They actually said they've chosen not to proceed with this. So.
I don't understand that. I mean, there is a software change request. We have a software change request number.
We created an option, SCR 257462, create an option to only allow access from users in a particular user group to log in from a specified list of IP addresses. And it said, Highland Software Development staff have reviewed this enhancement request and chosen to close this request and not pursue its development.
Really? Okay, I had not heard that as of yesterday. So if it happened after yesterday morning, I hadn't heard that. Liz, did you know? Have you heard about that or?
Yeah, we communicated that to Peter and the team.
Oh, so okay, so you must have communicated that like yesterday afternoon or something?
They brought up the same sentiments that Joel has, that it's not an application security concern, it should be a network concern. And that there's some other options to like single sign-on. Well, they brought up a PeopleSoft question that Joel brought up.
Okay.
So I think we're going to regroup and talk about single sign-on options as alternative suggestions.
Okay, you're saying to beef up the single sign-on to handle that instead of doing it through this way. Interesting. Okay, well.
I have a comment to offer. While it's not direct, oh my goodness, here. The comment that I have to offer, while it's not directly related to the technical aspects of setting up user security or the campus security to the network, this is more of a general comment that it was my understanding after having served on a committee to review these concepts and to give feedback, our ISO was present, as were the other management of tech services working on this. And there was a great deal of work and effort put together on the level 1 and level 2 access concept. How is the university approaching this issue? As a matter of fact, the CO did not indicate that we were being audited because of the PeopleSoft issue. They wanted tighter controls internally. Who's accessing what information? How are they accessing that? And who's responsible for knowing that? Those were the 3 basic questions that we tackled. While, like I said, this isn't a technical response. This had more to do with a policy-related issue on campus. You might want to refer to your ISO, find out if he has any type of a committee where he has people that are reviewing this on campus. We have a draft that's currently been submitted for review, and it's probably going to take a few more months before we get feedback on that.
So are you talking about PeopleSoft now or OnBase or what?
I'm referring as a general subject response. I'm not being specific to PeopleSoft and or OnBase. Level 1 access. who is accessing the information, why are they accessing it, what should they be seeing, and who's responsible for knowing that. Those were the basic questions that were brought to us as a committee to answer and to review documentation that was being written for that on our campus. Like I said, this isn't a technical response, but I do know that we as Fresno State did begin our work on that. I hope that helps. And maybe your ISO has something that he's working with others on campus?
I just know the ISO, he sits next to me, and he's one of the two people who have been, saying security, security, security. The other one is our technical person, essentially. So the technical person and the ISO are the ones who are pushing this security, security, security thing.
It's a very big subject.
Oh, it definitely is, yeah.
I mean, while maybe this hasn't turned out the way you were hoping, I think this brings up kind of the broader question, which is, how do we as a group of 16 or 17 or 20 or 23 campuses come together to kind of leverage ourselves, leverage our ability to get together and help drive Highland right toward sort of things that are more open toward higher education, toward any student success initiatives. I mean, any of these development pieces that we've been talking about today, including security. So I think I'd like to figure out how we do that together, because you're saying let's vote for this, but I'm like, what are we not voting for? What's the opportunity, right? If this was successful, what else are we not doing, right? How do we figure that out?
Right, that sounds like the next topic, right? Okay.
So I think that's a great idea that we need to figure out. This wasn't necessarily a bad approach. I'm just not sure it was the right topic. If you really have that issue, I think whoever mentioned two-factor authentication, I think that's a great solution. Because that adds the physical piece that you're trying to do, and that just solves it, right? If you don't have the second factor, you can't get in. So put all the HR people on two-factor authentication.
Right, and actually, yeah, that was something we thought of, and the problem was that OnBase does not natively support two-factor authentication.
That's not an OnBase problem. Make it that an AD or whatever your authentication solution is. Make it
right.
make it drive two-factor for that group.
Yeah.